Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Watching Mental Health. And I am so excited because today we're talking all about energy healing, and just these really important parts of life that we just don't always talk about with mental health. And for this conversation, I've brought forward an expert, I believe, in this field, Natasha Price. And she is first and foremost an energy healer, having spent the last 23 years of her life exploring and learning about energy healing. And she'll say that on her first Reiki session, she had an unusual experience, which then made her passionate to find out more about universal energy. And from that point on, really delved into this fascinating adventure. And so today, Natasha is a Reiki master. She completed a master's in parapsychology, and she focuses on our energy fields, what they contain, how our energy fields relate to our physical bodies, and how we can clean and clear our energy for optimum health, including physical, emotional, and mental or spiritual health. And so she is a published author, also the host of the podcast Balm Up to the Soul. So all of our podcast listeners out there, definitely check that out. And on this episode, we're going to be breaking down how energy really does impact our mental health and the basics of parapsychology for anyone who's wondering, really talking about how to use energy healing in our own mental health healing journeys. And so with that, welcome to the show, Natasha. I'm so glad to have you here.
Oh, thank you, Katie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you again so much. And I do believe you're an expert in this because you really have been doing this for so long. And before we jump into it, I just want to ask, to tell me a little bit more about your story. What brought you to this? What made you go into that first Reiki session?
Well, really, it was that Reiki session that set the whole thing off. So I just had my third child, and it had been the hottest week of the year, and he was a big baby. And I just had terrible swollen ankles. And somebody said to me, "Why don't you go and have a Reiki?" And that was the first time I'd ever heard the word. It just had not been in my consciousness. I was spiritual, but I just wasn't aware of that. Up until that point, he was my third child, so I'd had three children within a 9-year period. And, I was just involved in family life. I just didn't have any awareness outside of that, really. Um, so I went along. I don't think I relaxed at all. I was, I lay there with my eyes shut, but thinking, what's she doing? Where is she?
Right.
Um, but I had a really, really strange experience. And instead of frightening me, because I think it could have been frightening to some people, instead of frightening me, it just made the walls of my little life in a box fall down. And I was like, how have I got to this age and not known that this existed? What is it? Where does it come from? How does it affect us? And it just made me fascinated. I just thought I have to find out these questions. And that was the start of it, really. And then I trained to be in Reiki. I went through the process with my mum. We trained together to be masters. And then, I kept adding other healing modalities, and I did my masters, and I've just kept on. And it's purely been because I've been fascinated, not with a view of setting up a business or, offering sessions or writing books or having a podcast, but that just sort of evolved as it went along. And then alongside of that, of course, I've been a lawyer. So I've had a foot in very different camps for the
Wow.
last, yeah, strange. But yes. So yes, that's how really I got into energy healing.
That's so interesting. And to know that you have this kind of other life as a
Mm,
lawyer, that is so interesting to me because those worlds are so different, right? And when you're
yeah,
in legal, like you're based on facts and this is what it is. But in spirituality and Reiki, it's so much more abstract, right?
yeah, exactly. And I think I've often tried to work out how I could merge the two along the path and why I seem to be in this position with a foot in different camps. And I've never been able to sort of put them together really.
Mm.
Um, but I've come to realize that having done the energy healing, that enabled me to stay in the environment, the corporate environment, because it really helped me, gave me tools to stay centered and balanced. And I think
Mm.
really that was what it was all about.
I
Um,
love that, and I was
yeah,
just gonna say that. I bet that
mm,
the Reiki and the spirituality keeps you grounded, during these, this very stressful career, essentially,
right.
is being a lawyer
Yes.
can be incredibly and
Yeah.
stressful, and I think that a lot of lawyers, maybe they don't necessarily pay attention to their mental health or their spiritual health, right? Because they're so
Yeah.
busy in the world, and that can lead to burnout and to all sorts of really bad problems.
Absolutely. And I think it's getting better now in the UK anyway.
Mm.
But yeah, absolutely. It's a very stressful environment, and in the discipline I'm in, you have to be quick. So
Yeah.
you're a lot of work. You have to do it quickly. You need to do it correctly, you know.
Right.
And when I was younger, um I would wake up in the middle of the night thinking, "Oh, I haven't done that and I haven't done that." Or I'd be awake for a few hours worrying about things, or am I going to get into trouble? Or then at work, if something goes wrong, my stomach physically would just flip and
Mm.
literally drop. And I
Mhm.
thought, I can't survive for, I'm not going to last unless I find tools to help me. And that's when I turned to Reiki and those other modalities and other ways that I found to keep me calm. And then
Yeah.
that evolved into helping other people, really. But,
Yeah.
and I would have terrible eczema at that point as well, which I now know was caused by the stress and anxiety. So,
Mm.
I began to realize that it's all interconnected. The physical, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual, it all, to me, it's like this beautiful, colorful, organic bit of machinery. And if
Yeah.
one thing is out, then everything's out. It's
Right.
not quite flowing properly. So and I think that's really important understanding mental health as well, because I think we need to look at all parts of ourselves. We need
Mhm.
to get them all into balance.
We
To
do.
have, yeah,
And, it's a challenge because I think that we're in a better place today than we were 20 years ago, right?
absolutely.
Like you said. And
Yes.
I think even with mental health and physical health, we've started to realize how connected they are.
Yeah.
But people still don't really give spiritual health, I believe, the attention that it needs. And I think maybe a lot of people maybe connected with religion, and so they say, well, I'm not Christian, or I'm not this, and so I don't have that. And it's not that, is it? Like, spiritual
No,
health is so much different. And so explain to me more what spiritual health is, why it's so important in that, to link that with our other forms of health.
I think it's our trust and our faith.
Mm.
And even for me, it's talking to people about finding their passion.
Mm.
Because even if it's something like, and I'm not talking about making money out of it, I'm just talking about them finding their passion, because that energy of passion and enthusiasm, we've all felt it. It lifts our souls, doesn't it? It just makes you feel excited and refreshed. And
Mm.
I think, so I often talk to people in that way to get them to understand how important that is. For me, surviving the law, my passion was energy healing, but it can be anything. It could be growing a particular plant. It could be baking sourdough. It doesn't matter, as long as you get that passion from it. And then I also think it's I mean, I call it spirit. That's, to me, um,
Mhm.
what's most important. It's what links us all. Some people call it compassion. Greg Braden talks about compassion linking all of us.
Mhm.
The Buddhists talk about it being compassion, that the energy that links all of us. but then it's something more than that as well. It's something, this all-knowing energy. So maybe in Reiki, we talk about it's not us directing the energy has the intelligence, the energy knows where to go. The energy has the answers. It has it's that all-knowing presence. So I
Mm,
might call it spirit, other people might call it God. Um, it doesn't really matter, I don't think. I think it all comes from the same place. And I
yeah.
think we're all feeling the same feelings when we connect to that. And it's just having that faith and trust that things are going to work out, that,
Mm,
that life can be better,
right.
that maybe we can heal and we can live a healthy life.
Right.
Spirituality is quite hard, I think. It's a very complex, very complex, um, very complex topic,
Yeah.
definitely. But it
It
definitely is
is.
part of our overall holistic health.
It is. It is. And it has
Mm.
been for centuries, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
we have always had spirituality ingrained in us in
Mm.
some way. And
Yes.
so it's important. And I think what you mentioned, it's like hope, right? And that's
Yes.
important, that to
Yes.
have that hope feeling.
Yes, absolutely. And all of these feelings have frequencies, of course.
Mm,
And so that when I talk about passion, that's a really high frequency. We all have heard about like being grateful and talking about what we're grateful for. That's a high vibration. And this
yeah.
has all been looked at scientifically as well. Um, so in energy healing, what we're trying to do is amplify those emotions, those high vibrations. And when you're in that high vibrational state, when you're enthusiastic about something, nothing drags you down, does it?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
the low vibrational emotions or states just they can't be in your presence. So, it's yeah, hope's a big one. Hope and gratitude and
Mhm.
joy and just finding those moments in life. And I think
Mhm.
that's what people say, find out what gives you joy. We can't be in that state all the time. I d but you can have moments of it during the day. You can find small things and be very present and find small things that make you feel great. Maybe pets are a great example.
Mm.
They are really good for your mental health, pets.
Yeah.
Stroking a cat or cuddling your dog or, you know, um, it's that love and those sort of emotions.
Yeah, that's so true. And so would you say that is that what Reiki brings when I go into like a Reiki session is you're helping to kind of bring my energy frequencies up? Is that what a Reiki session does?
Yes, I believe so. Yes. And we talk about you talk about the chakras in the energy system, and they're
Mm,
literally just where the energy, wheels of energy that turn the rest of your energy around. So a healthy aura or a healthy energy field is beautiful. And this always shocked me, but beautiful, bright colors, like just flowing, like those sort of oil on water pictures that you used to do at
yeah.
primary school. That's what a
Mm,
healthy aura looks like. But if we're holding on to quite negative energy or thoughts, or then the energy can become quite grey, it can spike, it can become quite stagnant. So what we're trying to do is so the chakras will clear all of that energy, and we're trying to keep the energy flowing. So
mm.
Reiki will work on the chakras and will open them up and help that energy flow, basically.
Wow. That's amazing. And it's so cool. You had this what sounds like a really unique experience during your first
Oh,
session. And then you took that and you ran with it and really educated yourself.
yes. Well, it was just so bizarre that
Yeah.
I just had to know what it was about. I just had, when something happens that is just so, and you just think, what? And, I wasn't young either. And I just thought, how have I got to this age and I haven't got a clue about this? Shall I tell you what happened in
Yeah,
the
please,
session?
if you're comfortable, I'd love to
Yeah.
know.
So basically the room filled up with what I call spirits. So, and it was almost like quite cartoony, which sounds bizarre, but in the cartoons where you have like a ghost that looks like a sheet, but with a face to it,
Mm.
and the room was full of them, and they were
Wow.
swirling around to the point that I physically ducked at one point, because one came right up to my face to look at me. And I was thinking, what on earth is going on? What is happening? Um, and like I say, it could have been frightening. It could have really put people off and just thought, I'm not doing this again.
Sure.
But I didn't have that feeling. I didn't have that feeling of fear. I just felt, I was just fascinated, basically. I just thought, I need to know what this is about. And in fact, I have a picture, which maybe the listeners can't see, but I discovered this picture a few years later. It's by a Mormon artist, actually. But this is exactly what I saw.
Wow.
And I just thought, no, I
That's
have
so
to understand
interesting.
it. Yeah. And so for me, this all knowing presence, I wonder sometimes, is it full of souls?
Yeah.
Is that why we can mediums work? Is that what they're picking up
Yeah.
on? Um, that's opened up a whole different
Sure.
learning sort of understanding. Um, but yes, it just fascinated me, and I can't say I've got any definitive answers yet either, even after 23 years. But it's been fascinating along the journey to learn as much as I can learn. And I sat in circle for a long time to do mediumship, because I just thought, maybe that's what they are picking up on.
Mm.
Um, is it just that it was shown to me in that way so that I would be fascinated and start this journey? You know,
Mhm.
was it shown to me in that way because, I would call that spirits, so they wanted to show me that that is what flows through us,
Mm.
and we can connect to spirit. I have no answers.
It's hard to
Only
know.
questions.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
um
But what is clear though is that you seem happier now. You are in
oh,
a
absolutely. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. And if anything, people at work say to me, "You are so calm. You're
Yeah.
this calming."
This presence.
Yeah,
Yeah.
calming presence. And I can only put that down to energy healing. And the fact
Wow.
that I've worked on myself, because energy healing is about looking at our darker side as well, our shadow side, looking at the traumas that we might have experienced in life and working through those. So it's not a quick fix and it's not easy, um, but it's so rewarding, and that you get to a certain. I think I've got to a feeling of peace, actually. And that doesn't mean life doesn't happen.
Right.
Life happens, but it means that you can stay centered and balanced, and you can deal with things in a much calmer way.
Right.
Um, I think a famous poet once said, "The cure for pain is pain itself." And
Mm.
that's how I look at the work that we do. It's can be overwhelming, but you go into the pain, and then by going into the pain and understanding it, you can sort of you can sort of release it and expand more into a compassionate state. And
Yeah.
that's not easy, and it's not a quick fix. You have to work at it, but that's what energy healing is about. And
Mm.
I think that's essential that we all do that and all work through our darker sides, if you like, our painful areas.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
because we're human, we have both
absolutely,
light and dark within us, and we
absolutely,
need to we need to appreciate, acknowledge, and work with both.
absolutely. And it's not easy being human. This is a
Right.
tough school that we're in.
It is.
It is. It's a very tough school. And but I often think I'm not sure. that if I hadn't have found the energy healing and that passion around it, I'm not sure where I would be now after 29, or even if that I would have survived that long in the corporate world,
Right.
um, because it
Yeah.
is a hard place to be. And there is so much overwhelm and burnout and
Mhm.
stress and anxiety, it's hard. It is
It is
hard.
hard, and we're in such a busy world that,
Mm,
to have that spiritual, just within you, that spiritual healing, that point that you can come back to and balance yourself, center yourself, is
yeah.
just so valuable.
Absolutely. And for exactly that reason, when I have clients, and I do it for myself as well, I say, stop. You have to
Mm,
just find time to stop, even if
exactly.
it's for 5 minutes. And
Right.
I think, the banning of social media for in some countries, I think actually I quite agree with that,
Oh,
because
yeah.
that's so much information. People can scroll through for hours. They're constantly activating the brain, and
Mhm.
and we need to just stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
We need
sit
to
back.
learn to be bored
Yeah,
almost, right? Like
exactly.
how we used to
Yeah,
be bored. Like, that's so important, to
yeah.
have that.
Yes, that's
It's so
right.
true.
Whereas kids, and it's overstimulating,
Yeah.
and then it
It
affects sleep, and then, and it just compounds it. So
it
I
does.
say to people, you've got to stop, you've got to create space for yourself somehow, even if it's 5, 10 minutes a day. And we're also busy, aren't we? We're also busy, and we look at screens all the time,
Yeah.
which I don't think is so good. So
No.
it's about stopping, it's about breathing. None of us breathe properly either. And it's
Right.
about going out into nature. I'm a big one for being out in the trees and the nature. Um, and, in Japan, they prescribe forest bathing because it is so good for our mental health too. There is a reason why we say, and people laugh at it and say it's very woo woo, but there is a reason why you say go and hug a tree,
Yeah.
because, trees give off compounds that calm
Mhm.
us down, that help our mental state, So, being out in nature, doing that, but stopping, just
Mhm.
stopping for 5 or 10 minutes. I
Yeah.
I go and walk. I have 3 dogs, and I go and take them to a dog park, which is fabulous because you drive in, you shut the gate, it's all fenced in, so you can let them loose, and that they're safe, and they have like a tree house in there for them, and a sand pit, and
Mhm.
it's fun. But I always walk around while they're
Mhm.
having. And the other day I went and sat on the bench and I just watched the clouds. And as a kid, you sort of, that looks like an elephant, or that looks like an apple, or whatever.
Mhm.
And I did that for about half an hour. I sort of connected with my inner child, and I thought, that's brilliant. You just
That's
shut
beautiful.
your brain off and do
Mhm.
something like that.
I
Um,
love that. So I
yeah,
was gonna ask, what are some tools that people can use to connect with their spirituality and with their spiritual energy? And it sounds like you're saying some great ones here. Be in
yeah,
nature,
yeah,
hug a
yeah.
tree,
Yes,
take some time,
absolutely.
look up at the sky. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, and forest bathing is, we have a lady round here who does forest bathing, and it's beautiful. It's about walking very slowly around trees, sitting among trees, and looking very closely at them, and just taking in, more than just rushing past them. So it is about slowing down and doing something with purpose, but in that nature scenario.
Mm,
Um, what else can we do? And the other thing is, it's also about being kind to yourself, drinking lots of water, sleeping well. I do exercises in the shower, mental, intentional exercises like
mhm.
affirmations. And I sort of do them in the shower because when I had 3 children, that was the only place that,
One place you could.
that was quiet. Nobody was going, "Mummy,"
Right.
And you sort of do it automatically anyway, don't you? So you can
Yeah.
be thinking things through. You can imagine letting go of things that you no longer need to hold on to emotionally and
Mm,
seeing them going down the plug hole like sort of ink in water. You can do all of that. Intention as well. It's something is so powerful, and it's something that people miss really. But intention is really like a switch in energy healing. It is what causes the energy to flow. So if
right.
you set your intention, like you get into the shower and you say, I want anything I no longer need to hold on to, any
Mhm,
emotions that I no longer need to carry around, baggage, if you like, I want it
mhm,
to just be released. It starts a process. It's a bit like that Pavlov's dogs, ringing the bell, and
mhm.
it's so you do it in the same way every day, and you start to do it and it becomes a habit, and you feel a shift. But that's
Yeah.
something else you can do. Absolutely. And anything like, I do yoga as well, which I absolutely love. I'm terrible at it. I'm very inflexible, having sat at a desk for 30 years. But it's great. It's and there's a real spiritual side to it, which is lovely. Um, Anything like that, meditation, and like I say, find something that you're passionate about. I mean,
Mm,
I write a lot. I write for online magazine as well here in the UK. Um, and that's my passion. I love that. So for me, and being creative as well puts you into a different state. And I
that's
think,
am
yeah, just baking,
mhm,
painting,
mhm.
you don't need to show anybody else. You don't need to grade it, or, it's just, it takes you out of your head, doesn't it, in a
Yeah,
way? And you can
yeah.
just create something.
Yeah, that's such a great point. It takes you out of your head. I think that
Mm.
people, they look at spiritual healing and they think, "Oh, I need to do something. I have to go to church. I have
Yeah,
to pray." And then they get overwhelmed by that, right? But
yeah,
really it's just stepping back and getting out of your head. I love that you keep bringing it back to passion because you're right.
mm,
Like that feeling that you get when you really love something that you're
yeah,
passionate about and you like that's an energy and we
yes.
all feel that when we're in it.
Yeah. I think the Japanese call it ikigai, is your ikigai. So find
Mhm.
something that you're passionate about. And none of this is like, you can being in your head is then saying, "Oh, I'm rubbish at painting. Oh, I can't do that." Or
Right.
it's not about that. It can be as rudimentary as you like. It's just being creative and just feeling that there is a shift in your energy, you can feel it.
Yeah.
It's feeling that release, if you like.
Right.
Um, yeah. So,
That's
yeah, find what you're passionate about. It can be anything.
mhm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, you took your passion and kept running with it and went on to get a master's in parapsychology. So
Mm.
tell the listeners what is parapsychology?
So, parapsychology is everything that we experience outside of our normal senses. So,
Mm,
outside of hearing, sight, taste, etc. It's what we experience outside of that. So, metaphysical phenomena, if you like.
okay.
Um, and then, you know, a lot of the masters, it was fascinating, by the way.
I bet.
We did things like alien abduction and,
That's cool.
all the figures and stats around that, and near death experience and all sorts of things. But a lot of it was about trying to make metaphysical phenomena fit within the sort of parameters of the science box, if you like. And if it
Interesting.
doesn't fit in that box,
Mhm.
science doesn't recognize it. And
Mm.
to me, that didn't make sense. I felt like saying, well, science needs to make their box bigger
Right.
because
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 I see this. It's here. Yeah.
yes, but also, because things like thoughts. We all have
Mm,
thoughts. We know we have thoughts. They're energetic. Science can't prove we have thoughts. So that doesn't make sense to me at all. But it was fascinating, and we covered so many topics, and it was a really, really interesting course, basically.
Wow. That's
Mm,
amazing. And then
mm.
you went on to write 2 books, I believe,
I
right?
did.
Tell
Yes,
me
I
more
did.
about your books and kind of what they are. I think they're both different.
They are. The first one, Freedom of the Soul, is like a proactive workbook. And this was really triggered because I wanted to give people tools like that we've been talking about, because life is difficult, it's a lot of overwhelm. But when my middle daughter got to about 17, um, we were having a chat one day and I realized that her group of friends all suffered from different mental health issues and quite severe ones like, self harming,
Mhm.
really quite severe, apart from my daughter. And she seemed to be the one that sort of held them together and
Held them
supported.
together, yeah.
Yeah. But it terrified me because here's a group
Yeah.
of 17-year-old girls and they are all suffering
Struggle.
terribly.
Yeah.
And then one of them came round for tea and she discovered that my daughter had been attuned to Reiki as well because she was attuned at 11 and that I did Reiki and she wanted to know all about it, much to my daughter's embarrassment, but she did. Um, but I noticed she became really animated, talking about, listening, and it just sparked that idea. And I thought, right, I'm going to write something about energy management, about these tools, about these ideas and concepts, about doing different meditations, about the chakras, about different forms of breath work that you could do, just so that they could see there are other tools that you can use. There are other pathways that can help you feel less the anxiety that they were obviously feeling, the being out of control, and that sort of free fall feeling that obviously um, that was affecting them. And also looking at the news all the time, which is so negative. I think, there's a lot of fear as well. So that's what initiated the first book. So it's Freedom of the Soul. And then last year I wrote The Red Magus, well, it came out last year. Um, and it's a novel, it's a story. But I also do past life regression and future life progression and soul continuum work. So I sort of wanted to explain to people what that was all about, but without sort of teaching.
Yeah.
So I weaved that into a story, really, and it became a bit of a drama. It's a bit of a drama, a bit of a thriller, and I just thought it was really, people can take it as pure fiction if they
Mhm.
want to. Other people will take it on different levels, and that's
Mhm.
fine. But I had great fun writing it and weaving all these spiritual themes through it, and throwing in crystals and essential oils and all
That's
sorts.
amazing. I
Yeah,
love how you're able to kind of weave those things into like a fiction novel because,
yeah.
it can be hard for someone to want to pick up like a self-help type book, right? But
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
other side of that, they can read a novel and then get, something out of that.
yeah, exactly. And the best compliments I've had are from people who've said, I would never pick up a book about past life regression. I would never go to that subject, but actually, I really enjoyed it. And I
Wow.
thought, wow, that's great. That's great because
Mhm.
it's just got someone else to maybe just start thinking about it, or think, maybe there's something in that, or
Mhm.
it's I see it like sort of allowing energy, just my ripple to move out gently.
Yep.
And maybe it'll sway somebody, maybe it'll interest somebody, you know, and they'll go off on their own path.
Exactly. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think you're right. That ripple effect is so powerful. And yeah, so where can people read these books? Where can they get them if they're interested?
Both of them are on Amazon, and the Red Magus is also on Barnes and Noble. So
Oh,
on the
lovely.
website, yeah.
Congratulations on
Thank
that.
you.
It's so
Thank
hard
you.
to write a book.
Yes, it's a process. It is a
It is a
process.
process.
Yeah, definitely.
That's amazing. Well, so how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about maybe your services or utilize you as Reiki? Can you do Reiki virtually, or is it really only something that you can do in person?
No, you can do Reiki virtually. I have a long-standing theta healing client, and she's just become attuned to Reiki 1, and she lives in Leeds, and I
Oh,
live in Suffolk. So we did it all by Zoom, and she had the most amazing healing process afterwards. So clearly,
it
you know,
works.
yeah, it's how distant healing works. I have a client in India, and I send him treatments distantly, energetically, and he loves them. So that's how energy healing works. It's all to do with quantum physics, all a bit above my head, but we know it works. So,
Right.
yeah,
We know there's science there. It
yeah,
it exists. Yeah.
yeah. So my business is called Dandelion Therapies. So people can look me up, www.dandeliontherapies. And I'm also on Instagram, Natasha Joy Price. And, always happy to chat or, see if it's something that people could be interested in or if it's going to work for them, past life regression, future life progression, between lives, theta healing, Reiki, compassion
Wow.
key as well. I do that as well, which is a lot of inner child work. So yeah, and
Wow.
it's fascinating. Everybody's different. Every session is
Mhm,
different.
mhm.
Really, really interesting work.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. I implore people to go to your website and yeah, to learn more because you offer
Yeah.
so much more than just Reiki.
Yes.
And your expertise it really goes beyond. And so that's so exciting.
Thank
And
you.
then just to know that virtually, that you have clients all over and
Yeah.
that it's still like it's helpful for people. I'm just awed by I think, your passion really taking you to this place.
Yeah, yeah. It is it always fascinates me. We have when I first started, it had to be locally. But now you can talk to anybody across the world. I was talking to a lady in South Africa this morning. It's so easy now, isn't it, with the with
Right.
the
Right.
internet? Absolutely, yeah. And of
Well,
course
thank
my
you so much. Mhm.
sorry. I was just going to
Oh,
say
no,
my podcast, is lots of listeners in America, in fact, more than in the UK.
thank you for bringing that up,
Yeah.
and yeah, definitely, where can people tune into your podcast?
So I'm on Apple, I'm on Spotify, Amazon Music, lots of different platforms. So
Fabulous. All right, so all the
yeah,
main platforms, and what's
yeah,
your podcast name again?
balm to the soul.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much for being here, for being a guest today on Watching Mental Health, and for really breaking down the importance of spiritual healing in line with mental health. We need our spiritual energy in order to feel happy overall. And so
Yeah.
it's important that we think about that. And so I just appreciate your time and expertise today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to chat to you.
Absolutely. And for everybody watching, this is Watching Mental Health, and we are basically published every other Wednesday. So check out my website at katierosewechter.com, and you'll see all the latest episodes, as well as Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and where you see all your podcasts. With that, have a great day, everyone, and we'll see you next time.